Christmas lights, the flicker of the candles as they are glowing in the evening, the glow of all the lights in the darkness, it truly is something we can come to cherish and honor. It reminds us of something that we may not even be aware of. The story of Christmas begins in darkness. The darkness of oppression, famine, exhaustion, and greed. God's people, the nation of Israel, were a defeated people when Christ was born. They had been conquered by a governing body and set into lives of slavery, lives of non-existent hope. The setting of Christmas is not the labor and delivery ward at your local medical hospital. The setting was oppression. The setting was taxation. It was decreed by the Roman government, and they were wishing to make sure that everyone was counted for. They needed an accurate count of all people so that their bounty could be collected. All of the hopeless people were ordered to return to the town in which they had been born, to be counted and to be subdued. So yes, today we do cover our trees and our front yards and even our houses with lights. And they do look beautiful. But it's the darkness that brings us to church. Generation after generation, over 2,000 years, we have not been able to eradicate the world of its darkness. Today, we still live in a dark world. The acts of war and genocide and racism and oppression are still prevalent. People are experiencing hunger and unemployment, emptiness and depression. Poet Robert Frost wrote these words, "I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in the rain, and I have walked back in the rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have been one acquainted with the night." You may be here tonight because of the lights and the packages and the boxes and all the bows. You may be here because it's tradition and perhaps we won't see you again until Easter. Yet I would bet we've all experienced the darkness at some point in our lives. In one form or another, at one time or another, darkness has touched the life of every person here. And the light makes us feel warm. It makes us feel comforted and relieved and found. And even maybe a little bit hopeful. Our common connector this evening is the darkness. The scriptures speak quite often about darkness in our lives and in the world. And nowhere does God's word tell us that things aren't as bad as they seem. But rather, his word affirms that darkness is real. And it's present with us this very day. So what is the good news of Christmas? Well, there is light at the end of the tunnel. When God created the universe, he spoke these words and he said, "Let there be light." And there was light. It was the first struggle that light had to break into and through the darkness and the void. Then the prophet Isaiah, who lived 700 years before the birth of Jesus, he proclaimed these words, "People who walked in darkness have seen a great light." And then the Apostle John, who lived with and was taught by Jesus, he proclaimed these words, and he said, "All things came into being through him. And without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life. And that life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." Wars are such time of darkness. In 1864, the American Civil War was in its third year. And there's a tale of inspiration, a story that was told during the winter of that year. The story goes that Major General George Pickett of the Confederate Army received word that his wife had given birth back home to a son. In celebration, huge bonfires were lit up and down the southern encampments. Of course, as you can imagine, these fires were seen by the northern armies, and they raised the attention of General Ulysses S. Grant. So scouts were sent from the north to see what was being planned. When the scouts returned with the news of Pickett's son being born, Grant also ordered that bonfires be lit in celebration. You see, Pickett and Grant had attended West Point at the same time. They were soldiers together. For miles up and down the front lines, fires could be seen burning that night. No war, no deaths, only light. Light celebrating the birth of a child. Light broke into the darkness that night. Now, of course, this is just a tale, and most of us know that the war had continued until 1865. The darkness had returned. But the good news of Christmas is that in the midst of deep, deep darkness, there came a light, and the darkness was not able to overcome it. This light was brighter than a bonfire, and it's still burning today. This light is an eternal flame. We come here tonight because of the lights and the packages and the decorations and the boxes and the bows. But what you need to hear before you leave, and what you need to remember when you leave and go out into the world, is that the darkness you are carrying with you, perhaps the darkness that you may have experienced in the past, does not have the last word. The darkness of world events, they can make us think that the light can be snuffed out. But the story of Christmas, the story of the light that comes from that gift, it proclaims that the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And this light still shines brightly today. The ancient Hebrew people, they were very, very afraid of the dark. So much so that they had another place called the outer darkness, which was completely void of anything. To them, when creation began and God said, "Let there be light," it was a breath of fresh air. The void and the emptiness of darkness was cast out, and hope and peace flooded in. Can you imagine what it was like for them to hear Jesus when he walked and said he was the light of the world? We need to hear these words again and again. The children and the families in the city of Aleppo, Syria, they can only hear the booming of rockets and the rat-a-tat-tat of gunfire. They're imprisoned in the middle of a war, and the entire world has turned their backs on them. The people of Ethiopia, they can only hear the growling of their empty stomachs. The people in the war-torn Israel, Bosnia, and Afghanistan, they long to hear these words of light and hope and peace. The victims of drug addictions can only hear the cries of the mourners as they sing funeral hymns. The darkness of poverty hangs over some like a rain-filled cloud. Darkness is real and it's present. But because of what you and I know about Christmas, it will never go so dark that we can't see light. Into the darkness, God sent an eternal light, a light of the world. For it is the light that breaks into the darkness, is what his word says. It says that it intrudes upon the darkness, not the other way around. The way in which God created the world and placed light within it, it's the same said of you and I. God created us. And He planted light in us as well. Our hands and our mouths and our emotions and our thoughts, they are meant to be the sun and the moon and the stars in the world. We are meant to take the light that is cast into our lives, that we were planted with, the light of God, and then shine that out into the world. We are made in the image of God, so that everything that God embodied would be reflected in us, and then come beaming out into our world. In ancient Greece, the runner who won the race was not the one who crossed the line in the least amount of time. The one who won the race was the one who crossed it in the least amount of time while his torch was still burning. We've been so busy these past few weeks. We've been rushing around shopping and buying and planning and partying and visiting and just so crazy with our schedules. We've been racing towards the wrong finish line in our lives. I'm afraid we're in danger of allowing our own torch to be extinguished. It was when Moses took a break on his journey that he heard God's voice in a burning bush. How is it with your spiritual torch? Is it burning brightly? Because the greatest need that we have in this crazy, mixed up world today is to let people know that there is hope in this world. If you've not heard that, or perhaps you came here this evening and you didn't know that, let me be the first to tell you this. Life is worth living. No matter what. There's neither darkness nor despair in this world that can rob us of God's light that He has shined onto us. For we know that the light of this boy child born this evening, born this day, means that life has overcome death, that love conquers hate, and that truth will never win, will always win over lies. You and I are people of Christ's light. And we must share that light into the world. Did you ever notice that one candle does not go dim when it shares its flame with another? And yet that light then spreads throughout the room and into the world. It breaks into the darkness. And darkness will never overcome. Tonight, as you light your candles here and you sing Silent Night, Holy Night, Son of God loves pure light, we pray that the light of Christmas will shine and illuminate the dark corners of your life and those dark corners that are out in the world. And that like the flame of a candle, as you share your light with your neighbor, the world will be a much brighter place. Merry Christmas. Our ushers will now come down this evening to receive your tithes and offerings.